Welcome to everybody to come into the Between the Lines today. So nice to see so many faces. So we're very happy that you're here. Be sure you get something to eat or drink. There's some snacks over there. I see just a few cookies left, some chips and some dip. So please feel free to grab something during the talk. So today, the title of our presentation is Zombies 101, Cultural Analysis of an American Obsession by Melissa, I'm going to mispronounce it because you kept telling me how to say it. Grunow. Grunow.
There you
go. Okay. All right. So I am going to pass out a sign-in sheet. It's just to see how many people we have here. If you are here and you would like to receive extra credit for a class, please put down the class and the instructor name if you know it. So I'll just start it over here, and I'm sitting over here. I just wanted to circulate around by the end of the talk. So without further ado, Melissa.
Hi, everyone. So glad to see so many zombie enthusiasts. Or maybe you're cookie enthusiasts. Whichever, I'll take it because you're here. So glad to see all of you. This is a really exciting presentation for me to deliver because I've been obsessed with zombies for a really long time. Like, it's almost embarrassing how obsessed I am. I find a way to integrate some kind of zombie-related lesson into every class I teach every semester, whether my students like it or not. And usually it goes over really well. But zombies have infiltrated our American culture for over 80 years. And today what I'm going to do is talk about how and why they, like the zombies themselves, the motif of the zombie is undead. It just won't die. All right, so I'm going to bump this mic if I don't move it. Hold up a sec. So to begin, it seems like these days zombies are everywhere. In addition to film, television, and graphic novels, zombie paraphernalia is readily available for our consumption, no pun intended. There's the obvious zombie, such as Halloween costumes and decorations. But if you don't want to stop at Halloween, you can continue the zombie theme into Christmas. You can zombify your family portrait to hang over the fireplace. You can dress up with zombie jewelry, like I'm wearing right now, play an apocalyptic round of Zombieopoly, throw yourself a zombie-themed birthday party, and warn trespassers of the zombies lurking in your backyard. I actually have that sign on my fence. Just as zombies are everywhere, so are the zombie hunters and zombie outbreak responders, like this Good Samaritan in a drive-through line ahead of me earlier this summer.
What's it say? Zombie outbreak response.
Yeah, zombie outbreak response team is what the sticker says. Of course, I cannot forget perhaps the most iconic portrayal of zombies in popular culture. While not current, it's definitely timeless. The thriller dance scene has been replicated everywhere, from such films as 13 Going on 30, A Prison Yard in the Philippines, a video that went viral in 2007, wedding dances, and Zumba classes across the country. So yes, zombies and zombie-themed merchandise are everywhere. Even if you personally don't like zombies, or you don't understand the fascination, you cannot avoid them. They are an integral and integrated part of our American culture. But why? That's what we're going to look at today. The modern notion of what a zombie is can be traced to the Haitian voodoo folklore of the 17th and 18th centuries. At that time, it was believed that slaves captured from Africa and forced to work on sugar plantations who committed suicide to escape their forced labor were denied entry into eternal paradise, and were then condemned instead to trudge around the earth without a soul. It served as a warning to those who tried to escape slavery through death that there was no real escape. Over time, this legend morphed into voodoo belief that bokors, or voodoo priests, had the power to turn people into zombies. The unfortunate individual who was chosen to be a zombie would be poisoned by a bokor, causing vital signs such as heartbeat and breathing to diminish to the point where the individual appeared dead. And consequently, that person would be buried alive. That individual was later exhumed by the bokor, and she or he would remain under his spell without speech or free will. So let's talk about the word zombie and where that comes from. As language, as we know, tends to change over time, the word zombie comes from the Congo word zombie, by way of the Creole word zombie. Both words refer to a dead person who has been brought back to life. Current monikers for zombies, such as the undead or the living dead, have managed to stay true to this original meaning. So now we got some history out of the way, I wanted to get to my main argument. And that is that the zombie, as an icon, is a metaphor for our fears, and has been for the past 80 years. Zombie fiction in film really isn't about the zombie. Instead, the zombie apocalypse narrative is an allegory for what we fear most of the time. Things like pandemic and contagion, racism, socio-political change, depersonalization of humanity, nuclear warfare, or any other pervasive threat and its potential impact on humanity. We fear what we don't know, and we give a face to that fear by giving it the face of the zombie. So let's get scientific for a minute and talk about what fear does to the brain. Fear and perceived danger, whether they are real or imagined, activate the amygdala, which controls emotion. So you can see up there on the slide, the amygdala hangs out right behind the prefrontal cortex. The prefrontal cortex is where all your logic and your evaluation, your ability to make good decisions happens. And right behind it is all your emotion and all of your senseless decision making. So they're kind of like all occurring in the same part of the head. This triggers a series of physiological responses, from a flood of adrenaline to involuntary muscle tension, blood flow, hyper-alert body tingling, and increased respiration, among other effects. If the threat is immediate or right in front of you, such as this girl frightened by the mouse, the response continues to impact the entire body. This is often referred to as fight or flight, or more recently, fight, flight, or freeze. When we think critically about monsters in film and literature, we tend to classify them as personifications of what we fear. Frankenstein's monster, for example, illustrated our trepidation about science that gets out of control, very much out of control. Godzilla came from our fear of the atomic age, and werewolves fed into a panic over becoming prey instead of predator and humankind's detachment from nature. Vampires and zombies overlap in that they can be linked to our fear of disease. We can see the symbolic connection between zombies and rabies as easily as we can see the connection between vampires and the AIDS epidemic. But aside from the brief popularity of the Twilight Saga from 2008 to 2012, Team Jacob forever, zombies hold their place as the embedded monster in American cinema and literature. Their use and meaning is constantly evolving. So zombies aren't just replacing vampires as the monsters of the moment. They never lost their place. Instead, they are the monsters of always. As long as there is the fear of something, there will be zombies. So zombies in America can be traced back to a 1928 novel titled The Magic Island by William Seabrook, and the 1932 film based on that novel titled White Zombie. Zombies represented the fear of the loss of white colonialism over a quote-unquote savage world. White zombie epitomizes colonialism, particularly white men of power. In the film, dark-skinned men are zombified for slave work, and a white-skinned woman is hypnotized into sexual submission. While there were some zombie films after White Zombie that played off the idea of the cultural other and losing one's social privilege and power, there was a shift in the 1940s from fear of threat to American values to fear on a much larger scale. The reason for that is that World War II was emerging and brought with it mass genocide, atomic warfare, and the threat of communist dictatorships. The resulting Cold War revitalized anxieties over Soviet communism with the Red Scare and scientific developments such as the space race. Zombies became an integral part of how Americans grappled with these fears without having to confront them directly. Instead, they went to the cinema. Following the nuclear bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki in August 1945, and the first Soviet atomic bomb test in 1949, Americans' fears of nuclear radiation and Asian xenophobia began to manifest in the presence of zombies in entertainment. Yet, the zombie horror motif really took off and never lost its popularity with George Romero's 1968 film, Night of the Living Dead. George Romero is actually touted as the godfather of the zombie. In this film, zombies were caused by a space probe's radiation that causes a mutation. This was at the height of the Vietnam War, and the zombies in that film reflected the fear of military-industrial complex, and survivors had just as much reason to fear the government as zombies themselves. In addition to the Vietnam War, the 1960s were rife with assassinations, the civil rights movement, and counterculture rebellion. These were turbulent times in America, and they made their way into film. In Night of the Living Dead, a small group of survivors take refuge in a farmhouse. At the end of the film, Ben, a black man, emerges as the house's sole survivor, only to be shot and killed by a southern white police officer and burned along with the zombie corpses. Released just 5 months after the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr.'s Night of the Living Dead's final scene speaks to the nation's race relations at the time. How many of you have seen the 1960s version of this film? Did you watch the continuing credits? So if you continue to watch this film and watch the continuing credits, it's even more disturbing than the scene where Ben gets shot. In the continuing credits, we actually see the white policeman, the sheriff's office, everybody who's out cleaning up after the zombie mess, stringing up Ben's body in trees, attacking it, mutilating it, etc. So it kind of goes along with the additional racial unrest that was happening in our country at the time. But what's so disturbing about it is that it was allowed on that film. It's so brutal and so extensive that they didn't include it in the film itself. You have to stick around and watch the credits, and you see that brutality taking place. So the classic and consistent zombie traits that we believe today were introduced in Romero's Dead films. Slow, lacking cognition, hungry for brains and flesh, and can only be killed with a bullet or blow to the head. However, there are just too many of them because they all turn their victims into animated corpses as well, quickly growing their droves exponentially. This is also the first time we see zombies in hordes, rather than the isolated few who are easy to run away from or kill. In 1978, gotta rock the pink shirt, man, love it. Romero released Dawn of the Dead, where the zombie trope serves as a criticism of consumerism and has been touted as the greatest zombie movie of all time. Raise your hand if you've seen Dawn of the Dead. Those of you who have seen Night of the Living Dead, which one do you think is better? do? You think so? Anyone think Night of the Living Dead is better?
Another one that has zombies is Night of the Comet.
Yeah, there's like hundreds. This is Zombies 101 though, so I'm not going to get to all of them. But yeah, it's one of the most, I guess, one of the oldest zombie debates when it comes to zombies in pop culture is which one is better, Night of the Living Dead or Dawn of the Dead. I think Night of the Living Dead is better, but I'm just one person. No, by no means an expert. But most people, the majority, think that Dawn of the Dead is better. So seeking supplies at the shopping mall, the characters find that it's already been overrun with zombies. They are us, says Peter, one of the survivors looking out through the glass doors. When the zombies overrun the mall, the escalators on, music playing, fountains spewing, we see little different between holiday shopping crowd and the zombie apocalypse. So this is a still from that film, and it just looks like the mall is busy on a Saturday afternoon when it's actually being overrun with zombies. Pandemics in the 1980s brought a new fear to America, the fear of global contagion. Ebola was detected in Sudan in 1976. AIDS manifested itself in the 1980s, and the avian flu broke out in China in the mid-1990s. Outbreaks of disease became the new threat and cause for how zombies are reanimated. And 28 days later, in 2002, apes that are infected with a highly contagious rage-causing virus escaped from a medical research lab. The infection spreads throughout the world and society collapses as a result. Disease and terrorism become the fear of the moment, and zombies reflect that fear. So I want to pause here for just a second, now that we're kind of focused on fear before I switch gears. If you have a pencil and paper with you, can you please take that out? I always like to build activities in, always the teacher. So pencil and paper, I'm not collecting it, I'm not grading it, it's not a test. Maybe you can borrow it from someone. We should have put on the poster to come prepared for class. I'd like for you on that piece of paper to write down your personal greatest fear. Now, it doesn't have to be a worldwide thing, but something about your own self that you fear or are afraid of or are the most worried about more than anything else in your life. You don't have to write a whole thing, you can just jot it down. But what is your greatest fear? So you've thought about that for a second. I'm going to try and lump you into categories. If you don't feel like disclosing the category of your fear, that's fine. You can keep it to yourself. You're not obligated to share. But if you don't mind to disclose, I'm just going to name a category, and if you think your fear fits into that category, I would like for you to raise your hand. Raise your hand if that fear fits into the category of friends or family. Okay, put your hands down. Raise your hand if that fear fits into the category of money or financial security. Raise your hand if that fear fits into health or safety. That's the majority of you. Raise your hand if that fear fits into another category that I didn't name. Okay, so the other, right? You guys are the other. Most people's fears tend to fall into those three categories. You have friends and family, so concern about an elderly relative, a child, is this person going to grow up to be okay? Is everything all right? Then we have concerns about money, financial security. I actually kind of expected more people to raise their hand because we're not, economically our country's doing better, but it's not perfect, and a majority of you are college students. And I don't know about you, but I was broke as a college student and always worried about money. And then the last category, of course, is health and safety. So things like being worried about cancer, being worried about diabetes, being worried about illness in general, as well as personal safety. So if you think about it in those three categories, the fear being family, fear being financial security, and fear being health and safety, and you think about how zombies have been portrayed, and just the few examples that I went through, they fall into pretty much every single one of those categories. Dawn of the Dead, you have kind of this, rather than fear of financial security, you have this criticism of over-reliance on money. With, for instance, 28 Days Later, there's, a crazy monkey escapes and, gets everybody sick. So these kinds of things, and then of course Night of the Living Dead, you have kind of family members or parts of families gathered into a house and they're all trying to stick it out for the end of the night. One of the things that's interesting about zombies and zombie apocalypses that I'm going to get into later in the presentation is the things that we fear the most that manifest themselves as zombies in film and literature and graphic novels also tend to be the things that would ruin us in a zombie apocalypse. So hang on to that thought as we get into the next thing. So, zombies are not just for entertainment purposes. Academic studies of zombies are quickly growing as since the early 2000s, researchers have hopped on the bandwagon. In 2007, the Zombie Research Society, or ZRS, was formed by world-renowned neuroscientists and academics from Harvard. They are dedicated to raising the level of zombie scholarship in the arts and sciences, and have named the month of May Zombie Awareness Month. And during May, if you want to raise awareness, you have to wear a gray ribbon. So put it in your calendar. ZRS members represent diverse backgrounds, interests, and theories, but are unified in their support of the Society's three foundational principles. Number one, a zombie is a biologically definable animated being occupying a human corpse. So that's their definition. Number two, the zombie pandemic is coming. It's not a matter of if, but a matter of when. These are neuroscientists from Harvard. Enthusiastic debate about zombies is essential to the survival of the human race. So, for a one-time membership fee of $25, you get a lifetime access to all the Society's activities, as well as the following: a laminated, which makes it official, ZRS identification card, complete with a unique membership number and assigned code name in case of the apocalypse, the official ZRS member t-shirt available only to full members and not available for sale. So you can buy other shirts on their website, just not this one because you have to be a member. Eligibility to join a ZRS local chapter in your area or start your own if one doesn't exist. And a minimum discount of 25% on all current and future items sold in the ZRS online store. So I looked it up to see if there are any chapters in Illinois, and I'm not even kidding, the only one is in Peoria. Which, makes sense given the turnout. So I actually submitted my membership fee over the weekend. My membership's pending. I'm not sure what they're waiting on. Maybe my background check, make sure I'm committed enough. But lifetime fee, man, cheap. I'm not sure where the meetings are, though. In 2011, Stephen Schwarzman, a Harvard neurobiologist, a lot of people work with the brains, love doing stuff with zombies, released his book, The Zombie Autopsies, Secret Notebooks from the Apocalypse. in which he presented a realistic scenario based on scientific evidence. He even came up with a scientific name for the zombie disease: ataxic neurodegenerative satiety deficiency syndrome. So basically, my brain doesn't work, but I eat other things. In 2014, an article in the Wall Street Journal reported on the increasing number of college campuses that offer zombie studies as a viable field of research. Columbia College Chicago, for example, offers the course called Zombies in Popular Media, and it's actually taught by one of the Zombie Research Society advisory board members. In 2015, McFarland Books, a publishing company in North Carolina, started its Contribution to Zombie Studies imprint. To date, it has published 24 books, among them such titles as Parenting in the Zombie Apocalypse, Romancing the Zombie, and But If the Apocalypse Did Occur. In 2015, the 2006 book World War Z was released as a film in which it depicts a pandemic and how the government handles its outbreak. Who has seen this one? Yeah, it's kind of a good one. Who has read the book? Yes, 3 of you. Excellent. This is why I opted to talk about the film. So, during the film, we learn that zombies won't eat the sick. So that's how humanity ultimately learns to survive. They create a vaccine from an antidote that makes them appear sick to zombies, and they can essentially live in cloak mode among the zombie hordes. But it begs the question, and this is something that I think is not really believable in this film, which, it's the only thing that's not believable in this film. It seems a little against our nature to offer a zombie vaccine generously around the world. It seems like it would be more our nature to charge a ridiculous amount of money for it and not cover it by insurance. Or to be like that dude who, Pharma Bro, who took the Dharmaphan and increased the price from like $7 a pill to $800 a pill. But he's in prison, so maybe that's why we wouldn't do it. The Center for Disease Control and Prevention, which is a government website, has gotten on board with its zombie preparedness page. This page includes such resources as a blog on how to prepare for emergencies, such as the zombie apocalypse, and a downloadable poster. So you can actually download that and print it and hang it every place. Today's zombie, though, is a product of a globalized yet risk-conscious world. Capitalism has led to globalization, but the trade-off is concern for our own resources. Such fears include resistance of immigration, which we have seen a few examples of in the United States, just a few, and a fragile financial market as a result. Our sense of the world is bigger than ever. And with international trade, politics, and social media that allows us to keep up with people literally all over the world, we are forever connected. Yet it's that connectedness that puts us at greater risk. Meanwhile, the scientific advances in medicine, technology, and warfare provide us with endless what-if scenarios that would lead to an imminent downfall of humanity. In an increasing effort to attempt to contain what we have, zombies have come to represent our fear of the unknown because they themselves are uncontainable. There's another fear, however, that now dominates the zombie narrative. What happens after the apocalypse? Once the dust settles and the survivors figure out how to survive, then what? The post-apocalyptic zombie situation presents a new fear, the fear of each other. Global unity is no longer possible. The tribes of people that form in the aftermath care only about one thing, themselves. All other life is disposable, as they are now battling over limited resources. So in the activity we did earlier, those of you who said your greatest concern is for friends and family, raise your hands again. Okay, you've all died. You didn't survive the high fives in the bag. Are you high-fiving because you survived? Or you're dead? No, you want out?
Because we got out before it got bad.
Yeah, you did. In some effort or attempt to save a member of your family or a friend who was bit or hurt or otherwise incapacitated, you also didn't make it. You're being family and friend-minded, being community-minded is actually a detriment in the zombie apocalypse. The tribes of people that form in the aftermath care only about one thing, themselves. These are them. Sorry, all those people who died, you're not on that picture. The post-apocalyptic survivalist mentality is the antithesis of community and government order. To survive means to relinquish what we have valued in our society for decades, the American dream. Raise your hand, those of you who valued or who your fear falls into financial security or some form of money. Raise your hand, don't be shy, because you know you're about to die, right? Yeah. Money doesn't matter anymore. It's no longer a commodity that we care anything about. Zombie apocalypse survivors are not the exceptional ones we value in our current society. The zombie apocalypse is a white-collar worker's nightmare. There is no need for lawyers, journalists, investment bankers, and especially English professors. We are liabilities in a zombie-infested world and more likely to get others killed if we cannot adapt quickly. In The Walking Dead, the strongest survivors come from blue-collar backgrounds. Cops, hunters, mechanics, even pizza delivery guys like Glenn, especially those living in rural, sparsely populated areas. Because the greater the population density, the greater the likelihood of a quickly growing horde of zombies. Raise your hand if you're originally from a small area that's smaller than Peoria. Okay, you're more likely to survive than people in Peoria, and far more likely to survive than those in Chicago. So when everyone's like, Chicago's better, it's like, not in the zombie apocalypse. This realization gives rise to the existential fear of our current economy. We will become obsolete. Those of us who care about our education, our money, our current jobs, we won't matter. The possible exception to this is the 1%, America's billionaires. There are a number of companies around the world that are meeting a growing demand for structures that protect from any risk, whether it be a global pandemic, an asteroid, World War III, and of course the zombie apocalypse, while also delivering luxurious amenities called Doomsday Bunkers. This is what the billionaires can ride out the end of the world in. The infrastructure of the bunkers includes such safety features as 9-foot thick walls, a 160-foot protective dome, a 5-year supply of food for each resident, and private military-level security. There is also a camp in Montana that teaches the wealthy how to survive the apocalypse for the bargain price of $1,420 per night. So if you got money, you can do it. The economic divide here is obvious. The assumption has always been that because money can buy anything, the rich will always survive. Well, with zombies, this is not a guarantee. Zombies destroy without any consideration for wealth, education, technology, or military strength. Our already fragile infrastructure will quickly turn to chaos in the event of a zombie apocalypse. Finally, zombies not only get us to face our fear, the threat of zombies forces us to confront our personal sense of morality. In The Walking Dead, for example, season 10 of which premiered last night, and I have not watched it yet, so no spoilers please. The zombies themselves haven't really been a threat for years. The real threat is other people. Desperation for safety and resources makes every stranger, and even some friends, potential enemies. And now it's a kill or be killed world. In an effort to survive, though, those individuals lose what they know most, their sense of self and understanding of right and wrong. But post-apocalyptic narratives offer the fantasy of the 0 point, where if we were to survive, we get to literally start over, away from our routines, our comforts, and our safeguards. Instead, we reimagine ourselves dealing with the hardships, dangers, and responsibilities of an unfamiliar landscape. We get to ask not just what if, but who will we be? What does it take to survive? This book, The Zombies Survival Guide, it's a real book. It's a thing, by Max Brooks, and it has sold over 1 million copies. So if you're wondering about survival tips, I'm not going to focus on that today. You can get yourself a copy of the book. While the tongue-in-cheek Zombie Research Society can entertain all this zombie talk is just that, entertainment, and even I can recognize that zombies are nothing more than an allegory, it still might not be a bad idea for each of us to consider a zombie survival starter kit. Only $7.99 on Amazon. And that's the end of my talk. I wanted time for questions, comments, thoughts. What do you got? Yes. Oh, you can clap first. Yes, go ahead. What's your name?
My name is Xander.
Xander.
I have seen some settings where a community is more of an advantage than it is a hindrance.
Sure.
Like, have you seen that movie Cargo on Netflix with Martin Freeman?
No, I really wanted to open this up for questions and comments so I can just add to my list of movies. So the question was, there have been times where a community has been more beneficial than a hindrance. For example, movie Cargo.
Yeah.
You said on Netflix?
Mhm.
I haven't seen it, so hit me with it.
So basically, a man, it's one of those settings where the virus takes him slowly. So he has 2 days after he gets bit to find a way to get his 1-year-old daughter to safety and find people who will raise her because he's going to die. And I feel like a really big part of zombie culture isn't just like the fear, but also discussing the humanity that arises in post-apocalypse situations.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
So that kind of goes back to, well, his greatest fear is, care for his daughter, that his daughter won't be taken care of. And in this case, it's not the community in general that's a benefit. It's that he's been bit by a virus. He's a single parent, I'm guessing.
Yeah.
Yeah, now he's a single parent. Maybe wasn't true last week, but now he is. And now he's the sole caretaker for his daughter, right? And now he's bit and he has to find people to take care of her. In that case, the premise isn't that community is beneficial. In that case, basically the idea is that the zombie comes to represent our fear as parents. Well, your fear, I don't have children. But that if we're not around, who will take care of them? And that's really what that one comes to represent. So it's really the community in that case is not that the community is a benefit in the zombie apocalypse. It's that the community serves to push forward the narrative because the bigger fear is what will happen to our children when we die. But now, Cargo, I'm going to see that one. Yes?
My name is Noah.
Hi, Noah.
Have you seen the movie Fido? It's a zombie movie, I swear.
I love this. I have not. I'll save it for my advanced class. What's the premise of Fido?
Basically, it's a movie that takes place in the 50s, roughly, from what I can gather, where their big reason is space radiation. It's a B-list movie.
Oh, sure,
It's
space
simple.
radiation, yeah.
It brought back the dead. There was a big war. They called the zombie wars, obviously, because
Zombie wars?
creativity is not
Clever,
a thing.
yeah.
And then someone invented a collar that kind of suppresses the zombie's urge to eat people.
A collar that you wear around your neck?
Yeah, a big
Okay.
chunky collar to put around their neck. So they basically became slaves, more or less. They become a workforce.
The
But
people wear the collar?
no, the zombies.
Oh,
Not
oh,
the people, my bad. The
oh, I'm
zombies.
sorry. I thought you meant the people
No,
wear the collars.
They
The
make
zombies
collars
wear
that
the
suppress the
collars.
zombies thingy. They become basically a workforce.
Yeah.
More or less disregarded.
Mm-hmm.
people live in small communities, all fenced in, big area where there's nothing but zombies in between.
Okay.
I found though that as the movie goes on, you kind of see every zombie tends to show emotion, if they have the collar on at least.
Sure.
They start to gain humanity at some point.
I see.
And you
Humanized zombies, my biggest pet peeve.
Yeah.
But it makes me crazy. But I'm not you. You're great. But like that idea that like zombies can think and feel and be rehumanized is ludicrous.
It reminded me of Warm Bodies in a way.
Yes, I've seen more bodies. I didn't even want to get into it. Notice I ignored it completely. I can't handle it. A student recommended I see that movie, and I was so mad at her that I was like, you might want to drop the class because I can no longer separate my emotions from your ability to produce good writing. So why is it called Fido?
That's just, it follows the story of a young boy living in this community with,
I see.
out of everyone in this community, his family is the only one that doesn't have a pet zombie.
Oh,
Yeah.
zombies are pets. Well, I mean, that really,
Quote unquote.
that reverts back to the original idea of them, which was to make slaves out of them and to punish slaves.
So he calls the zombie Fido.
The zombies
That's why it's
name
called
is
Fido.
Fido. That's really bad.
Yeah, it's more for just entertainment.
Yeah,
Of how bad it is,
but it still really relates to, I mean, thinking about how they came about, right? You
Yeah.
said it was like
Space
radiation,
radiation.
which in the 1950s was like a thing. You know, that was like one of the biggest fears. So
Yeah.
a lot of B movies and a lot of, I really skipped between like 1942 and like the 60s. I didn't get into a
Oh, this
lot.
came out in 2007.
But it takes place in the 50s,
Yeah.
right? But like that time period, coming out in 2007, but being a B movie is going to kind of like give nod to
Yeah.
the movies that came out in the late 40s and 50s, which were all about that. And they were all like, pay a dime, go to the theater, stay all day and watch 18 movies.
Mm.
And this was one of the fillers. That's what a lot of them were like in the 1950s. Yeah, so it's probably a nod to that, I'm guessing, but now I have two, I need to see it. Other thoughts, feedback, comments, things you agree with, things you didn't disagree with, things you agreed with and things you didn't disagree with. Yes, that makes sense. Agree, disagree, anything else you want to add? Yeah, Bob.
What's your opinion on Zombieland?
My opinion on Zombieland. This is embarrassing, I haven't seen it. I know, there are loopholes in my education. I'm aware and I'm ashamed, but you know, I've been prepping for this since last May and there's only so much time. And I took a lot of naps this summer, so I haven't seen Zombieland. But why do you ask about that one in particular?
Well, because it kind of relates to your topic about how what people are left and how they're doing what they're doing to survive and who they're kind of trusting and stuff.
Okay, so that kind of goes back. I came
Yeah.
across references to it a number of times in my research, but that's more of like the survivalist and the trust kind of side of it. Yeah, that one's actually already on my list because of my shame for not having seen it yet. Other questions? What's that?
Sequel's coming out soon, so now's the time to
Oh, I really need to get on that. Yeah, gosh, man, I have so much to do.
Just an interesting tidbit, you were talking about the comparison or the arguments that happened between Night of the Living Dead and Dawn of the Dead.
Yeah.
And I just looked it up because I was curious.
You believe me?
IMDb has them both rated at 7.9, so they're equal on IMDb scale. So that doesn't help us at all.
If the internet says it, it must be true.
Right.
Yes. No, yeah, I think when it comes to zombie scholars, that's where the argument ensues. Yeah, the most. Those scholars, those neuroscientists and theater majors.
How do people handle the gratuitous violence in things like Walking Dead? I hate to admit, I saw a couple of the episodes, and the violence was so over the top awful, I couldn't watch it anymore.
You can't handle the violence in The Walking Dead?
Absolutely not. So how do you respond to people who would say that's just extreme over the top gratuitous violence?
I mean, dude, it's the apocalypse.
And they're already dead.
And
I mean,
like,
honestly, that distances you from it a little bit, because
Yeah,
a lot of what
yeah.
you're seeing blow up or get torn up or whatever are
And the
the
zombies
zombies.
themselves. Is it when the zombies are like eating people that bothers you?
Everything.
And like you see the tendons coming out of their
Doesn't
necks?
matter what it is. Even that's disgusting.
Who's seen The Walking Dead, or at least some of it? Even if you stop watching it, don't tell me, it's fine. Has the violence bothered you all? Maybe it's a generational thing.
I feel sorry for that generation.
As you should. Yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry to like ask so many.
No, I love questions.
It does beg the question though, like where the divide between us versus them lies and how like we can manage to nullify that instinct of that's a human person in front of me, even though that person is like not a human anymore. Like
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I wish I could repeat everything you said exactly as you said it, because it was brilliant. But what he was talking about, like the idea of where does basically the line of humanity end and the zombie begin? If it's a reanimated corpse, it's no longer a person. What is it that makes a person, right? And how do we have that separation and that divide? A lot of, I know that early in the beginning seasons of The Walking Dead, they did struggle with that. Like the first time Rick saw a zombie, he felt bad for it, you know, and then if you keep watching, he no longer feels bad for them, because it's kill or be killed, you know. So it brings up an interesting question too, because so many times when the zombie has represented the cultural other, right? Like migration patterns, and even back in the beginning of when zombies came over to the United States, and it kind of represented like our fear, our colonialism fear that we're going to lose our settlements in other countries. It was really easy to separate the us and the them, and kind of that downplaying of humanity is what made slavery possible, for example. So it really kind of stays connected in a number of ways to our mentality in the United States, which is historically we've never really had a problem separating us and them. Sad to say. Go ahead.
Two things, back to the gratuitous violence you mentioned earlier. When they introduced Negan, I get what you mean with what you're saying there. It's just a lot of violence in that introduction scene for that character.
So you're on board with what Paul said about gratuitous violence, that it is a little over the top with Negan?
With Negan it was, yes.
Okay, do you want to go sit at their table?
He's a great people character.
Yeah, no, he is a great character, yeah. It just, it is, but it's AMC, I don't know what to tell you, Paul.
Have you seen where they introduced Alpha last season?
Oh, yes, yes,
That's another thing where it's the line between us and them.
yes.
If you know anything about the Whisperers, they hide themselves among zombies using literal skin masks.
That they cut off of real
Yeah,
people.
out of real people or zombies.
Mhm.
How would you define that versus them in the community?
The Whisperers?
The Whisperers versus the towns in the show.
I mean, well, in the show, so the question is, how many of you have you seen up through season 9 of The Walking Dead? Like nobody. People stopped watching it. It got boring. Yeah, that's what my students said. They're like, this show's boring now. And I'm like, you shut your mouth. So last season they introduced a new group of people that wear literal, like when they kill humans, use their skin, and wear like masks over themselves to blend in among the zombies. They're called the Whisperers. And so Noah's question was, how do I imagine they separate the humans in the towns and the communities and the Whisperers, who are still humans, but they live among the zombies. And in the case of the show, they're obvious villains. I mean, they're meant to be the bad guys, which is very interesting in that show, because for a number of seasons there, it was questionable about who the villains really were. In this case, I mean, obviously I'm rooting for the people in the towns and I think the whisperers are gross. But like, you know, like what they did to the town, you saw the end of last season?
Yeah.
So what, I don't want to spoil it for those of you who are gonna start watching it again. What they did to the townspeople at the end of the
Yeah.
season was atrocious.
Yeah.
And I think like what that does is that basically opens the door wide open that it's time for war and they need to die.
Well, also, you did see someone at least question Alpha more or less, even if she didn't say anything
Yeah.
in last season, and then she immediately killed the person.
Yeah,
That's-
yeah. Yeah, they are human beings without a sense of humanity.
All right.
That's how I would define them. This is so fun. Other questions, comments, thoughts? Yeah, Aaron.
Well, I've got another dart to throw at has Melissa heard of this one?
Yes.
But actually, it's a book. I read recently Colson Whitehead, Zone 1.
Yes.
I'd never heard of him before, but he won a Pulitzer Prize for the Underground Railroad, and I happened to run across this. And I'm just curious if you've read that, or have you got any comments? How does it fit into?
I haven't read Zone 1 yet by
Okay.
Colson Whitehead. It's on the list. I have a shelf. I have a zombie shelf at home. It's on the zombie shelf. I've heard really amazing things about it. I was surprised that he wrote a book about zombies after writing The Underground
I think
Railroad.
this one came first, actually. Though.
Oh, really?
I think that it was before.
So maybe because of his fame with Underground Railroad, everyone was like, he wrote these other books too. No, I'm just not familiar with that one. Yeah, sorry. That'll be Zombies 201. We'll talk about that one. Cool. Other questions, thoughts? Go ahead.
Familiar with any zombie video games?
Zombie video games. Okay, see, here's the thing. Resident Evil, I'm familiar with them, but I've never played them. The last video game I played was Super Mario Bros. 3. Sorry. Not really sorry, but a little sorry. Sorry for this purpose of this discussion. So, cool. Well, you guys are amazing, and thank you for coming and filling the room. And I think there's 4 cookies left, so help yourselves on the way out. And thank you again. So good to have you all here.